Have you ever wondered how to stay resilient in faith? How do some people face life storms without falling apart? Well, there's a powerful secret that Jesus Christ left us, and this secret can change everything. Spiritual strength in difficult times isn't about luck or natural talent. It comes from something much deeper. And what if I told you the answer has been in the Bible all along, just waiting to be uncovered? Today, we're diving into the secret to resilience according to Jesus. So, if you want to strengthen your faith, stay with me, because this lesson might just transform your life. Imagine walking through a desert where every step feels heavier than the last. That's exactly how Jesus experienced temptation after 40 days and nights of fasting. Hunger, solitude, physical exhaustion. And yet, his trust in the Father never wavered. Satan tried to lure him with quick solutions, but Jesus responded with authority. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. Matthew 4 verse 4. He teaches us that true spiritual strength in difficult times doesn't come from material provisions, but from trusting in God in moments of hardship. How often do we try to handle everything on our own? When bills pile up, when bad news comes, when anxiety creeps in, we look for immediate solutions. But is our first instinct to trust or to doubt? Jesus shows us that the secret to resilience, according to him, is not avoiding challenges, but facing them with the certainty that God is already in control. Just as he refused to turn stones into bread under pressure, we too are called to resist the temptation of trusting circumstances over divine provision. And what if the road ahead seems impossible? When everything around us screams that there is no way out, that is the exact moment to reinforce our faith. The Bible reminds us, commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. Psalm 37 verse 5. This doesn't mean standing still. It means moving forward with faith and resilience in the face of challenges, knowing that God never abandons us. And speaking of trust, how can we be sure we are truly living according to his will? That leads us to another essential teaching of Jesus. How often do we ask God to bless our plans, but fail to seek his? Jesus made it clear, "For I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me." John 6 verse 38. Even as the Son of God, he set aside his own desires to follow the Father's purpose. This teaches us that God's will and resilience go hand in hand. Those who strive to live by this principle find strength, even when the path seems difficult. How many times have we carefully planned something, only to see everything change in an instant? The dream job never comes, a relationship ends, a project falls apart. It's frustrating, but were those plans really the best for us? God sees beyond what we can comprehend. When we accept his direction, we find peace, even when things don't seem to make sense in the moment. Following Jesus' teachings in life means letting go of our own will to embrace something far greater and better. And what happens when we say yes to God's will? Everything. Our faith grows stronger, anxiety fades, and we begin walking with true purpose. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 reminds us, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." But how can we discern his will? One of the most powerful ways is through prayer. Life can feel like a whirlwind. Problems arise out of nowhere. Tough decisions surround us, and anxiety tries to take over. But Jesus showed us a sure path. Prayer as a source of spiritual strength. Before making any major decision, he prayed. Before choosing his disciples, he prayed. Before facing the cross, he poured out his heart in prayer at Gethsemane. This teaches us that no matter what we're going through, when we kneel in prayer, we find clarity and renewal. And why do so many people feel spiritually weak? Simple. Lack of connection with God. We often pray only when we're at our limit, treating God like an emergency responder. But Jesus taught that prayer should be constant. Pray without ceasing. 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 17. How can we strengthen our faith in God without daily communication with Him? It's impossible. Prayer is not a monologue, it's a relationship. The more we seek God, the stronger we become in the face of difficulties. Have you ever noticed how prayer changes everything? It doesn't just transform situations, it transforms us. When we lay our burdens before God, we receive something the world cannot give: peace. Philippians 4 verses 6-7 reminds us that when we present everything to God in prayer, we receive a peace that surpasses all understanding. But Jesus didn't just pray. He also showed us something powerful that strengthens our faith even more: serving others. The world teaches that greatness lies in being served, but Jesus completely reversed that logic. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Mark 10 verse 43. In a moment that astonished his disciples, he washed their feet, demonstrating that Jesus teaches serving others as the path to true strength. When we help others, we grow spiritually, develop empathy, and find purpose. Serving isn't a loss, it's a gain, shaping our hearts to be more like Christ's. Think about it. Have you ever noticed how helping someone can completely change your day? Sometimes a simple act, listening to someone in need or offering a helping hand, transforms both the one who receives and the one who gives. God's will and resilience become evident when we shift our focus away from ourselves and become instruments of divine love. Serving strengthens us because it reminds us that we are not alone and that our existence has a real impact on the lives of others. But there's an important detail. Serving doesn't mean losing yourself or seeking recognition. Jesus himself taught that his secret to resilience is doing good without expecting human rewards. When we serve out of love, God strengthens and renews us. And do you know what else? Serving produces something essential for overcoming any challenge: faith. After all, without faith, how could we continue helping, even when we don't immediately see the results? Imagine being in a boat in the middle of a storm, watching the waves rise higher and higher, feeling the strong wind and the water rushing in. Fear takes over. That's exactly what happened to the disciples in Matthew 8 verses 23-27. But while they were panicking, Jesus was sleeping peacefully. When they woke him, he simply calmed the sea with a word and asked, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Faith and resilience in the face of challenges go hand in hand. Trusting in God in difficult times is what keeps us steady, even when everything seems to be falling apart. How many times do we let fear paralyze us? Fear of the future, of loss, of failure. But Jesus teaches us that faith frees us from these chains. He said, "Do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." Matthew 6 verse 34. In other words, what's the point of suffering in advance? Worrying won't change our circumstances. What truly transforms our reality is learning how to strengthen our faith in God and trusting that He is already in control. Faith doesn't ignore problems. It gives us the courage to face them. And the most amazing part? Jesus said that even faith as small as a mustard seed can move mountains. This means we don't need an enormous faith, just a living faith. When we choose to trust, we see miracles happen. But faith also leads us to another fundamental teaching: forgiveness. Because without forgiveness, our hearts become a heavy burden, keeping us from moving forward. Forgiveness is one of the hardest things to practice, yet one of the most freeing. Jesus gave us the greatest example of this when hanging on the cross. He looked at those who crucified him and said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23 verse 34. If he could forgive those who hurt him so cruelly, how could we refuse to forgive someone? The importance of forgiveness for the soul is not just a beautiful lesson. It is a path to emotional and spiritual freedom. Have you ever noticed how holding on to resentment traps us? The person who hurt us moves on with their life, yet we remain stuck in bitterness. Jesus warned us about this in Matthew 6 verses 14-15. If we forgive others, we will be forgiven. But if we do not forgive, we will not be forgiven either. That's because forgiveness is not about the other person, it's about us. When we let go of resentment, we make room for healing. Biblical stories of overcoming struggles show us that those who forgive find peace, while those who hold on to anger become prisoners of their own hearts. But how can we forgive when the pain is so deep? Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or minimizing what happened, but rather deciding that the wound will no longer define our lives. Pray about it. Surrender it to God. Prayer as a source of spiritual strength helps us release what we cannot let go of on our own. And speaking of prayer, there is another powerful secret Jesus taught us: persistence. After all, praying just once and giving up is not the way. How many times have you prayed for something and felt like God wasn't listening? The truth is, He always hears, but many answers require time and perseverance. Jesus told the parable of the unjust judge, Luke 18 verses 1 to 8, to teach us this. A widow kept pleading for justice, and because of her persistence, the judge finally granted her request. Now, if even an unjust judge gives into persistence, how much more will God, who is just and loving, answer those who cry out to Him day and night? Prayer as a source of spiritual strength is not just an act of faith, but also an act of resilience. Praying once and giving up is not faith, it's a test. God wants us to learn to trust and wait for the right time. Imagine a farmer who plants a seed and then, the next day, digs it up to check if it has sprouted. That would kill the plant. Prayer works the same way. We must plant it, water it with faith, and trust the process. Philippians 4 verses 6 to 7 reminds us, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Trusting God in difficult times means understanding that He works in His perfect timing. And what if the answer doesn't come the way we expect? Prayer is not just about asking. It's about aligning our hearts with God's will. Many times, God gives us what we need, not what we want. And the more we pray, the stronger our faith becomes, helping us endure trials. After all, no one grows in faith without facing challenges. And that is exactly what Jesus also taught us, who hasn't made plans only to see everything turn out differently than expected. The truth is, what we want is not always what we need. Jesus showed us this in the most difficult moment of His life. In the Garden of Gethsemane, He prayed, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done. Luke 22 verse 42. Even knowing the pain He would face, He submitted to the Father's purpose. God's will and resilience go hand in hand. Trusting in God means accepting that His ways are better, even when we don't understand them. Have you ever wanted something so badly, only to realize later that not getting it was actually a blessing? God sees what we cannot. Romans 8 verse 28 reminds us, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. When we trust, we find peace, because we know that He is always guiding us toward what is best. Trusting God in difficult times doesn't mean we have to understand everything. It means resting in the certainty that He is in control. But how can we accept God's will when it takes us through difficult paths? The answer lies in faith. When we surrender our desires to Him, we learn to live with less anxiety and more purpose. And that surrender involves something powerful, trusting not only in good times, but in every area of life. And this leads us to a fundamental principle of resilience, a life built on faith, service, prayer, and forgiveness. Life is not a straight path. There are highs and lows, moments of joy, and seasons of struggle. But Jesus showed us that no matter what happens, we can build a solid foundation. When we trust in God, pray without ceasing, serve others, cultivate faith, and practice forgiveness, we establish a firm foundation that keeps us standing, even in the storms. How can we be resilient in faith? By following this path. The secret to resilience, according to Jesus, lies in living a life rooted in these principles. not just in good times, but every single day. Have you noticed that the strongest people are not those who have never faced challenges, but those who have learned to trust God through them? When we rely on prayer, we find strength we never knew we had. When we serve others, our perspective changes. When we forgive, we free our hearts. And when we keep the faith, we face any difficulty with hope. Spiritual strength in difficult times does not come from our own ability, but from total dependence on God. Jesus taught us that a house built on the rock withstands the storm, but the one built on sand collapses. Matthew 7 verses 24 to 27. Which of these houses do you want to build? The answer lies in your daily choices. Seeking God, trusting His plan, and living out His teachings transforms us completely. And if you've made it this far, you've already taken the first step toward that transformation. If there's one thing we've learned today, it's that spiritual strength in difficult times doesn't come from ourselves, but from a well-grounded faith. Jesus Christ taught us that trusting in God, living according to His will, praying persistently, serving others, and forgiving are the key pillars to overcoming any challenge. So, how about putting this into practice? Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these lessons spoke to your heart the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this video helped you, don't forget to leave a like so more people can be reached by this message. Oh, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. There's a lot more content coming to strengthen your faith. And before you go, there's a video on the screen and in the description that builds on this teaching. I'm sure you'll love it. May God bless and strengthen you always. See you in the next video.